That right there, that's supposed to be part of the bearing, like the whole cone thing. But you can see it moves independently of the bearing. That's a problem. And also this collar, there's daylight between the collar and the bearing. This is definitely part of my problem. Brace. Probably gonna not be the base we need. Nope. Here's you gotta cut the carrier bearings off. But I've never get a sip of my QT drink. Alright, so when it comes to reassembling the pieces on the axle, the sequence and the orientation is super important. You've got a retaining plate, you've got a seal, you've got the bearing, and you've got the retaining collar. All four of those things need to go on in the right order, in the right sequence, because the last two pieces get pressed on. The retaining plate I bought does not have the lip on it. I bought the drum style. Turns out I've got drums, which I already knew. It goes on first. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. These don't match up. I'm glad I checked that first. You should have all four holes lined up, but I do not. But it sort of underscores the importance of making sure you have everything right before you start pressing stuff on. Because once you start pressing stuff on, that's sort of the point of no return. We put this back on our axle shaft. That goes on first. The next thing that goes on is your seal. I got the Timken, I think it's called the 9912S. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to put grease on this before we put it on, because you don't ever want to install a dry seal. Our finger and some grease. We're just going to run our finger around that seal surface. So the seal's got two sides, right? There's the side with the spring and everything. Right? You can see the spring there. That goes inboard. Anyway, we're going to slide this sucker down nice and easy. There we go. So the bearing, you're going to want a Timken. There's probably other good brands, but it seems like Timken is one of those things where if it ever goes out, somebody's going to say, well, did you buy a Timken? And if you say no, they'll be like, well, you should have bought a Timken. And if you buy a Timken and it goes out, they're going to say, well, did you buy a Timken? You're like, yeah, I did. We're like, well, what are you going to do? So either way, buy a Timken. If you buy the Timken Set 10, that's Set 10, it comes with the bearing, the race, and the retaining collar. Here is the bearing. Timken, made in the USA. So you might be asking yourself, well, which direction does this thing go? And that's a fine question. And the answer is, this ridge here is the piece that goes outboard. Outboard. Now slide this on, and so the next thing we have to do is bring it over to our press. And what we're going to use to press it on is the collar that we took off, that we just cut off the old axle, right? Because this happens to be the same diameter as the bearing we just took off, right? Imagine how that works. So we got the retaining plate. We're using the old one flipped over. I got my seal oriented correctly, and I got my bearing oriented correctly, hopefully. I did the transmission videos, I narrated everything, with this one I'm doing a different style.
Narrate afterwards. Go back and edit. Record a voiceover.
Not even doing that. Okay. Nylock nuts, 3/8 24. Do this one next.
This would be easier with the brakes off.
Right? Ah! So we want to slowly draw this plate in across all four of those nuts as that seal compresses before we torque it to a final value of 45 foot-pounds. All right, money. Boom.